Hi everyone. Do you know what's the gatekeep for ideas of this century? Conferences. That's right. The conference decision could affect the fate of a paper, and that means that the idea could be delayed for months and even become stale. Thank goodness we have sites like arxiv that help to host open source papers. And now we have alphaXiv that allows you to talk about the content of that paper in an interactive fashion. So I'm pleased to introduce Rehaan, a final year student at Stanford, who helped to co-create alphaXiv. And I'm very excited to see what it can do. So moving on to you, Rehaan.
Yeah, I appreciate the introduction. So, as John mentioned, alphaXiv is a site to kind of solve the problem of uh, information flow within academia. And the premise of the site is really simple. It started as a group created by a group of undergrads here at Stanford, including myself. And the thinking was that when discussing research, especially as undergrads, we had a lot of questions about specific parts of the research paper. And typically, the best way to get those questions answered was to muster up the courage and email the author. And that really didn't happen too often. And so, being CS students, we drew some parallels to Stack Overflow, Quora, and we were wondering if there could be some intuitive way to build a forum just directly on top of the archive paper, where the paper is front and center, and then the questions are kind of like on top of the paper. And so it's a very simple idea, very simple premise, and the basic idea is that you go to any archive paper, and you can change the archive in the link to this alphaXiv, and you can view the paper and all the questions directly on top of the paper. So here we see this paper on the left, and then there's questions on the right. And when people point out issues, the authors can respond, and it's almost a form of open peer review. Initially, even though the forum was just for questions and answers for undergrads, we quickly saw a lot of enthusiasm amongst PhDs and postdocs of kind of using this as this open review platform. And we didn't really realize as undergrads that there's as many PhDs that are disgruntled with the current peer review process as there are right now. And so it's been encouraging to see that there's been a lot of support for this project. The idea of the site is very simple though. So you have questions and the paper, and you can actually map questions to parts of the paper. So perhaps we can find a good example of that here. Yeah, so recently we actually had the authors of the recent Llama 3 paper from Meta, and we had people go back and forth and ask questions with the authors. So this is a nice example of this highlight feature where you can map a question directly to part of the paper. So here there's a
Nice.
question on
How,
this
how, how do we do that though? Like if you want to leave a
Yeah,
comment and highlight, then how
yeah,
how, how do I do that?
yeah, exactly. So you can click comment, and we slot comments into three categories: general, research, and private. The private comments are just visible to you. General is for the general audience, and research is if you have more detailed like critiques. And the thinking is that this is a forum for anybody, right? You don't need to be the most experienced academic to use the forum. And if you just have a general question, you can slot it under general. And if you have a longer research critique, that goes here. In this case, I'll show you like a simple private comment. Testing a private comment. And so a lot of people actually use this more as a note-taking tool than anything, that you leave your private comments, and when the time comes, you can go ahead and submit a question. So in this case, I've left a private comment, and yeah.
Are you able to share your private comments with others, or it's just for
Uh,
yourself?
no, so not at the moment. Right now, everything is all private comments are just to yourself. Initially, actually, when this was a project, just centered towards like the Stanford student body, we actually had a feature called private groups. And so within private groups, you could basically add people to your group, almost just like a Facebook group and or a group chat almost. You add people to your group, and then on every forum, you have like a place to leave comments just to that group. The reason we kind of moved on from that idea was we really want to focus on the public forum aspect of this. That there are a lot of places where you can leave notes and share notes, but I think like having a central place where you do like truly public discussion, that was really the thing we wanted to incentivize. But that is a great point.
Understand. Actually, when I first started using this site, alphaXiv, I noted that it was so like lively and bustling. Like I went to the paper, attention is all you need. Then wow, there were
Yeah,
so many nice questions about there, how to use query and key and so on. And I was
yeah,
thinking that like, this is actually a better form of open review because like, open review, it's things are a little more formal. People write very lengthy comments. But
Yeah.
actually, something like a Discord or Slack, like what's happening over here in alphaXiv,
Yeah.
concise comments, just asking about one single thing, you don't even
Exactly.
need to like be very formal. I think that
Yeah.
really helps a lot with collaboration or like
Yeah.
or like finding out answers. And that's why I like this platform a lot. Like I can imagine that if a lot of people use this platform, even the authors use it. Like I myself am author of a few papers, like maybe
Yeah.
Tash or so on. If people ask
Yeah.
questions over there, like and the authors reply, it is a global instant communication and not
Exactly.
just to the person who asked the question, but everyone
Yeah.
else can learn from it.
Exactly. And so you brought up a good point about really involving the authors. One of the biggest, I guess, worries when starting the project was a very valid concern some professors told us was that um, a lot of PhDs are really, really busy, and they're probably not going to have time to answer the questions that are on the forum. Uh, and one really encouraging thing to see is that actually hasn't been the case. That like even if the paper is as big as Llama 3, the authors are completely fine to answer questions in great detail. And that I think that's what makes the site possible. I'll say one thing. We talked to the director of archive actually through this project, scientific director Stein Sigurdsson. He said like, and it's not surprising. There has been many attempts at building a quote unquote comment section for archive. And I think what separates this is I think people really like the idea of it being directly on the paper, and people like the intuitive interface. And I think a big thing is presenting it as a platform where activity is already happening. And because it was initially used by researchers at Stanford, it always had some initial activity, and that kind of made it easier to branch out and grow from there. But I'm myself kind of inspired by the fact that authors are as enthusiastic as they are to just like respond to questions. And so that's cool to see. And the last point there is I think you brought up a great point of the comments being more bite size or shorter. Um, I think it's a good observation, and I guess because the site is still in early stages, that will kind of set the tone for the future comments that we'll see. And so it's a great point that comments are really on the shorter side. There are situations where there are longer reviews, but I would say those are oftentimes less upvoted, and people definitely seem to resonate more with like the shorter shorter type of questions.
Yeah, definitely. Shorter things means less resistance to post something. And
Yeah,
sometimes you just really want to have an idea out of your head. And
yeah,
this ensures that you can have your idea out without needing to feel like, oh yeah, I'm not so academic, because you don't have to be very academic to understand academic papers. Sometimes an innocent
correct.
innocent question can trigger a lot of thought. Yeah,
Exactly.
and I have another thing that I like to comment about this site. I think one good thing about using like stuff like alphaXiv is that you can actually see what are the papers that are more popular, like which are the papers that people comment about more. In some sense, uh, I know quantity may not be quality, but
Yeah,
in terms of like people voting with their comments in that
yeah,
sense, you can actually tell which are the papers that people are more interested in, and maybe you could pay more attention to those as well,
yeah,
because like there's so many papers out there. Like how do you
yeah,
know what
exactly.
people like? So I can totally see this being like a marketplace of papers, people
Yeah,
voting, and
yeah.
like
So
Ian
so
LeCun mentioned once, like he prefers a conference format where you invite people with like highest rates, or it's kind of open peer review, like people can comment about people, and like
yeah,
those better papers by some metric could be invited to present their papers, like
yeah,
rather than a closed door review with some reviewers. So
yeah,
I mean, this could very well be the start of this kind of platform.
exactly. And to that point, it's funny you bring up that you can gauge papers' popularity with more or less comments. The one reason right now we actually don't have a place to view like top papers by comments is we're currently trying to be careful about how you best do that because I guess with great power comes great responsibility.
Of
And
course.
so if you're determining which papers are being shown more or less in certainly not now, but at some point in the future, if this continues to grow, you can think about which papers you choose to prioritize may like make or break whether some paper ends up being seen by a lot of people. And so making sure that smaller voices and smaller organizations also have an equal shot at getting their paper shared, that's something we're being very deliberate about. And so it's one reason we don't have something like that yet, but it is in the works. A lot of people have suggested, showing papers by upvotes, allowing upvotes on papers. Right now, we don't even have that. These are pretty simple ideas that would go a long way, but they definitely need to be implemented, properly in a way that, you want to make sure that you don't just have Stanford, Meta, and Google as the top papers every single time. I don't think that would be doing the academic community a service, but certainly having some metric is in the future of the site for sure.
I think that's a very and a very important one, because this kind of social media outreach is very, very important to spread ideas, and you don't want to spread like ideas just because they are popular.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate all this thought behind this. Just one other thing is that, in the future, if people ever use this to select papers, I hope that like the number of comments will not be the metric, or something that
Absolutely.
is quantifiable shouldn't be the metric, because
Yeah.
people can game it. You look at academics now, citations is
Yeah.
the metric. People are
Yeah.
gaming it. They cite
Absolutely.
their own papers and so on.
Yeah.
That's not what we want. We want ideas to be shared because they are good. And sometimes the ideas in the paper may not be good, but it springs about discussion that is good. So
Yeah.
I really like this idea of a community collaboration to
Yeah.
improve upon ideas, and
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
discuss about it.
Absolutely. And to build on that, especially within the AI field, Twitter seems to be the place where, a lot of AI academics are active. And I mean, it's a great place to get the word out, but I think there's definitely room in the space for a more formal way to, kind of share and discuss papers. Um, and I think that seeing the fact that I think the fact that Twitter has been so popular among AI researchers, I think shows that like there is room for something. There is a room for something here where we can be more deliberate about, which papers you decide to recommend and show people, or which papers you decide to promote to a larger audience. One more cool thing is there are a lot of interesting new features that can be built on this. Right now, it's a very simple idea of a site. To your point about recommendations, right? There are a lot of cool things you can do that maybe based on the papers that a user is already reading, or based on the subjects they're interested in, you show papers there. And I certainly agree there should be some element of stochasticity of, you don't want to just, have something that can be easily gamed here, and, having some randomness in there and letting papers from smaller organizations have a chance to see the light of day. I think these are all really important things. But I think the fact that Twitter is our starting point, to be quite frank, I think that's a pretty low bar. I think there's a lot that we can improve there in kind of academic discussion.
Yeah, if let's say I were to write a comment here, will it instantly be showed to everyone, or will it go through some moderation?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what we do is we have some element of automated filtering, and that'll be immediate. That'll be before it gets a chance to go public. But from there, we're typically pretty liberal about what we allow, what we allow to first go on the site. So you'll publish the comment basically immediately once it goes through our auto filters. But from there, then we have a team of moderators that kind of make sure that the comments are of of a decent quality. And so the way we kind of figure out what is good quality and what is bad quality, because the project has kind of been around for a year, we have a lot of people that are enthusiastic about the site, and we kind of consult via the community what should be in our community guidelines. So we actually have a comment guidelines. I believe this is the URL. Yes. And so we have, the thinking is we don't want to be, I think a lot of sites like Stack Overflow have this reputation that, as a beginner, you're just not allowed to comment, right? You leave a question, it gets deleted. And we're trying to not have that reputation on the site. And so the thinking is like, you can be a beginner, you can ask beginner questions, you can be an experienced researcher. And with that being said, we do want it to adhere to some basic things. Obviously, if your comment is completely written by ChatGPT, those are typically removed. And then also it should be respectful, right? And respectful, detailed. And in the cases that they're not, we obviously do have to remove the comments. It doesn't happen as often. Typically, like if it's really bad, the autofilter catches it. But we do try to hold researchers to this bare minimum of comment quality. Another thing is there's a flag feature. So obviously, if our moderator team hasn't gotten to it by any chance, or hasn't, it's been you've seen a really recent comment that seems to be in violation of these rules, you can click the 3 dots here actually and just flag it. So yeah,
Nice. I like how you are making this an open voice platform where,
yeah,
there's really very little regulation and you
yeah,
can get your voice heard almost instantly.
yeah.
And just leave the regulation either by the moderators or by the community.
And
So
so that's another element of this, which is if you get negative comments and negative votes, that's a great form of moderation, right? If it gets negative votes and it gets hidden. And even with the ones that are very negatively voted, we don't actually remove it. Kind of like Reddit, it's just hidden. So if you want to view it, you can. Obviously, if it's bad enough that needs to be off the site, the moderators will delete it. One thing I do want to stress though is with the academic platform like this, you really do want to make sure you're doing the academic community more service than not. And so some of the things we do, some features that we do have that are actually highlighted on this image. Um, Even though anyone can create an account and comment, we do prefer for users to connect their account with ORCID, which is like a universal identifier for researchers. And if you do have an institutional email, that'll appear as well. And this helps give some more credibility to comments on the site. It is a hard thing. It's a fine line to walk between, allowing any comments. And then at the same time, we do have a lot of academics that come to us and say, I don't want anonymous comments on here. I don't want someone that can just, say whatever about a paper and then move on. The flip side to consider here is, let's say I've worked really hard on a paper and everyone is viewing my alphaXiv paper, and then one guy just says really bad things about the paper. You don't want that to, negatively impact the academic. And if you allow things like anonymous comments, those are more likely to happen. So our happy medium is to allow pseudonymous comments where you're allowed to set a username once. And we definitely encourage people to set their ORCID and have a university institution. But as you said, like if you're a high schooler or undergrad, there's no reason you can't ask meaningful questions. And I think that's shown kind of now more than ever within CS and AI. A lot of people in industry, a lot of students that are able to, that are really like reading these papers in good depth and asking a lot of good questions. So
yeah,
yeah,
in fact, a lot of good ideas actually come from people not in the field. Because
exactly,
if you realize something about being too much in the field is that your mindset gets aligned too much with the leading mindsets. And
exactly,
sometimes it takes a new, fresh perspective to see things. So I really
exactly.
like the idea that you don't just limit to researchers, you also
Yeah,
open to the public. And
yeah,
you know, in general, I think comments have their own weight. Like if your comment is good, people will like it. I mean, people respond positively to it. If you ask
yeah,
a negative comment or a comment that does not have constructive feedback or constructive questions, then
yeah,
in general, it also not be responded to positively. So I think this
yeah,
is called free market regulation. I
yeah,
love it because
yeah,
you don't need to determine like how you should post because that will severely limit the ideas that will be shared here.
yeah. No, no, that exactly agree.
Nice. Anyway, are there other like what are the other next few features we can expect from alphaXiv and like what are
Yeah,
your plans? Like, are you going to merge with archive, and so on? Like, could you share a bit
yeah.
of this with us?
Absolutely. So I'll say one thing that's been really encouraging is the folks at Archive have been supportive of the project. And so um, we're in the process. It's not finalized yet, but we are kind of in the process of petitioning to become an Archive Labs project. And what that would mean is our link would be at the kind of at the bottom of Archive papers, kind of hidden away. So that part is not too important. But I think what is really cool to see is that we've gotten a lot of encouragement from the folks at Archive. They're really open to trying new things and experimenting with new ideas. And so that's one good thing to look forward to. We'll definitely put out a big announcement when that comes through. In terms of actual features, I think the big thing that we're trying to change right now is the current experience on alphaXiv is very much it's pretty siloed, right? So it's almost like a GitHub issues page for my one paper, right? I go to the paper I was already reading, and then I go see the issues on the right. And what we're trying to change here is we're trying to make it more of an interconnected experience of if I'm reading this paper here, or let's say I'm interested in CS or some subcategory in CS, I would like to see, the most commented on papers in CS on alphaXiv. Or if I have certain interests, I want to see the latest papers. And so we are kind of all hands on deck and trying to make it a more interconnected experience. But we want to be careful about making it a positive to the academic community rather than having it devolve into some kind of popularity contest or
Yeah,
something that
understand.
becomes kind of toxic. But yeah, that's kind of the two big things to look forward to.
Yeah. So actually, on this note, I also recommend that, for the paper itself, if they have links like video, code, like maybe some other illustrations or what, they could just put the links at
Yeah,
some main part so that people can easily access when they see the paper. Because, right now it's done in the text of the paper, may not be
yeah.
hard to find, may not be easy to find. But
Mhm.
if there's some quick links somewhere, that will be really awesome.
Exactly. Two similar ideas there. A lot of people are suggesting allowing the authors to pin comments, and so you can almost think author can leave some links and pin it. And then we're adding like a resources tab as a fourth category where you don't even need to say anything. You put links that you think are useful, and yeah, those could be pinned. So I totally agree with that.
Nice. Also, I like to take your opinion of, like, compared to reading a paper versus watching a video, maybe a YouTube video. Like,
Yeah.
what do you see the good parts of both of these mediums are? Like, what's
Yeah.
good in a paper versus what's good in a video, and could you integrate both?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the video is a good way of if you're trying to figure out you have a paper of interest, but you want to see a little bit more about what the paper is discussing and what it's about. I think video there is a pretty good format. And then as you kind of delve into the details of a paper, that's maybe where it makes more sense to read. I'll say this as an undergrad, I would say this workflow that I'm describing is probably more relevant to PhDs. As an undergrad, when I would do research, a lot of the time some of these bigger AI papers would have really good videos about them. And so actually videos are a way to actually go more in depth about the paper. So those people like Yannick Kilcher, I might be butchering the name, but that post kind of YouTube videos that go really, really in depth uh, into papers, that can actually be a good medium to go into. If you were to declare a downside of videos, I would say that there's a lot of overhead in making the video. So unless it's like a really big paper, expecting a lot of video content is probably tough. Even from the author, I would say that even if you're the author of a paper, uh, trying to get a lot of authors to make high quality videos on papers is probably going to be hard. You could be a great author, but not everyone is making great YouTube videos like you that are great authors, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's probably a rare uh, thing to that's a rare form of content to kind of pump out. But
But
yeah,
personally, I prefer if, like, some people could just make 5 to 10 minutes shots of their papers, because
yeah,
in papers you tend to write all the details there, but
yeah,
the key ideas are actually very simple. So
yeah,
in the video, you are forced to only say the key ideas, and that makes understanding so much easier.
yeah. No, that totally makes sense.
I like a dual form of content, because
Yeah,
videos you don't go too long,
yeah,
but papers you don't get the key content easily. Yeah.
exactly,
So
exactly.
so I think a hybrid of these two would be like the future.
Yeah, and to build on that, when we first started the project, we would actually show HTML versions of the paper because the thinking was I used to do like research in robotics, and every robotics paper that we would publish, we would have to make a new website for that paper so we could
Wow.
link the corresponding videos. That was it. Like if you do a robotics project, you want to share videos of the project, right? Because that's like one of the final products you have. Um, and so long story short, I think the PDF is kind of like an outdated form of academic medium, and that we're probably this is not in the near future, but in some very long-term time frame, you can see expect to see papers more as like a HTML site, and then you can embed very cool videos. And now it's no longer like the static paper, right? It's a evolving body of work where people can add videos. You have different versions of papers. Um, edits are being made, um, and it's kind of like a living, breathing kind of
Yeah, I like that a
thing.
lot. It will be
Yeah,
like a GitHub page where you put links and
yeah,
videos, and you edit your code along the
yeah,
way. I,
yeah,
I really don't like the idea that, when the paper is published, it's just not get improved. It'll be
yeah,
much easier to read, if
yeah.
you just improve on the original paper itself, rather than you spout out 10 new papers to say you improve it.
Yep.
Yes.
And so absolutely, one of our advisors, John Ousterhout, is a prof at Stanford. He was one of the original, like, kind of talking through this idea with him. He since we're not, academics and or PhDs ourselves, we're a group of undergrads, he really highlighted this point. He said exactly what you said. He said that uh, a lot of times in academia, you're going to publish a paper and then you completely forget about it after publishing. That you publish it and there's just no need to go back and revise it or correct it, rather. You publish it, and as an academic, you're incentivized to publish the next paper. You're not really incentivized to go back and, make edits or kind of respond to community stuff. And so it's a pretty big problem here that exists in academia. And so
Yeah,
hopefully that
it
changes
is,
in the
it
coming
is.
years. Yeah,
Hopefully with this platform, when people realize that, hey, I'm editing comments, they will be more incentivized to, update their paper to
yeah,
address the comments. And it could be the very same paper, because I think
yeah,
that makes more sense. Like you address the
absolutely.
comments, you put, maybe someone asks, hey, what's the details of the experiment? They realize, oh,
Yeah,
actually I didn't put the details. So I go and upload the new version with the details. That will be
exactly. So on that point, I would love to share this really nice example. Back in March, this author, Jackson Burns, he published this paper in Chem Informatics called FastProp. And two respected voices in the field kind of pointed out that there were some issues and they wanted to see more details actually in the paper. And so they were pretty like constructive comments here on what they wanted to see from the paper. And I think like just last week, um, the author took these comments into consideration and actually
very.
uh, revised the paper. So I believe there is a V2 of this. Yes, there is a V2 of this paper. He's updated his paper,
You
and
got to
there's some
change
new
the site because
comments.
your drop down did not show V2 just now.
Yes, 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 yes. So that's actually the paper versioning is kind of tricky how you deal with it. So there are a lot of active things that are kind of changing here. But so we have the V2 of the site, V2 of the paper, and he kind of there's some more comments on questions that are kind of on the paper, and you kind of see it's this like evolving work. It's not this. I mean, honestly, props to Jackson for kind of taking this initiative and showing that
I
kind of
love it.
giving
I
a good
love it.
example.
Yeah, actually, this
Yeah.
also encourages people to be more responsible with what they type in their paper, because
Oh,
they know
absolutely.
that there'll be a community of voices that
Yeah.
might, especially for archive papers, that might
Yeah.
actually comment on their papers.
Yeah. Absolutely. And look, I've been to a few conferences myself, and like you can totally get away with like, you know, um, giving a code base. Like you'll be asked in CS conferences to share your code base, and I know firsthand like the code we write was not something that like is easily followable. So like if you have something that's open and like I'm sure I would have gotten comments that are like, wait, I tried this and you need to fix this, this, and this, and then we would have gone and done that. But I totally agree with that.
Yeah. So on this note here, like what are the, like, are you intending to like work with people like open review, like this could be a way to review for conferences as well. Are there
Yeah,
anything in the works for that? Because I
yeah,
really think this site is a great opportunity for those.
yeah, exactly. So we have planned to talk to the folks at Open Review. I guess it just hasn't we haven't gotten around to reaching out yet. Um, I think the reason for that is we are really focused on trying to get the public forum of this version, out there and get the ball rolling. Um, from there, I'm sure we could do cool collaborations on, an actual review systems for conferences using this. Um, but I think we kind of want to stay focused on what the first goal is. The first goal is that um, anybody anywhere can leave a comment and the author will see it. And I think once we get that, I think then we can do a lot of cool things in terms of working with reviews and conferences. I'll also add, even though it's a simple idea, one thing I'm kind of learning through this project is that building a website is hard, harder than I expected as an AI developer or AI researcher. Um, Case in point was the versioning there. That's in the process of being fixed, actually. There are a lot of small things that kind of add up. And so, making sure we check the small boxes before we, go and do too many big things is
I, I,
another
I
priority of
agree with
ours.
you. Like this also is a key thing about many startups. They rush too much and the
Exactly.
core things are not built. And
Yeah,
I think the points that you mentioned earlier, make sure the small UI experience is correct.
exactly.
The user experience is good. The community is built up. People enjoy using
Exactly.
the site. That is
Exactly.
way more important than using this as a review platform. In fact,
Exactly.
I don't really care about conference reviews at all. Like what I care is
Yeah.
ideas,
Yeah.
and whether the ideas are good, like whether the authors are willing to stand up to defend
Yeah.
their ideas. And actually not really more of a defend idea. I don't like this notion that you have an idea, you defend it. It's more like, hey, I have this idea. What do y'all think about it? It's more of a discussion thing
It
because
makes it very, yeah, exactly.
yeah,
It's very
I,
confrontational otherwise.
correct. In conference reviews, most of the time you are just like, especially for double blind reviews, the
Yeah,
reviews come back with like a little bit of, like what do you call that? You feel a little attacked. Yeah, because
exactly.
the
Yeah,
thing is because you don't see a name there, people tend to just bash. And I don't
exactly.
like that form of confrontational
Yeah,
review or response because it doesn't
exactly.
help. Like what you should be helping is saying that, hey, great idea. I think this part here needs more elaboration.
Yeah.
But unfortunately not all reviewers are like that. Yeah, some will
Case
just
in
take
point,
that.
case
Yeah,
in point. I would say these two are pretty critical comments, but they're done very respectfully, and they're done in a way where the author like takes kindly to it and improves his work. And it's kind of a net positive for everybody. Um,
right.
like here is
I've been through a
basically
lot
pointing
of
out,
conference reviews and like
yeah,
this kind of reviews are rare. Like the
yeah,
reviews for double blind conferences are typically
yeah,
more of like, hey, your work is
yeah,
you've done too small scale an experiment, it's not worth publishing. Then that's it.
exactly. Exactly.
That's not
I
constructive.
also find it very funny, and this is kind of a tangential problem, but um, like the reviewers in these conferences and journals are not paid, which is like I get it fine for a conference. I guess they're not making any huge profits, and this is less of a problem in CS. But one of the reasons why folks in physics, specifically have even though we have not marketed this or shared it with any folks in physics, like artificially, because naturally so many physics folks have uh, uh, kind of been drawn to the site because there seem to be bigger problems in peer review in physics that you have these journals that are charging like exorbitant access fees and charging authors like charging authors, and then the reviewers aren't paid. If you look at like, I mean, Nature, Elsevier, these guys I'm pretty sure make on the order of magnitude of like, I mean, just ridiculous sums of money, and the reviewers aren't paid. Um, so that's kind of also like a tangential problem of like these guys are leaving anonymous reviews, they're not paid, they probably like have their own work to do, and it's like it just does not lead to anything that's productive for anybody.
Actually, I hope that this platform will help to shift away from this like paid journal system because
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, the main thing is like people comment that archive papers did not go through peer review and so on. But if you have alphaXiv to have comments and stuff, it sort of
Yeah,
functions like some form of peer
exactly.
review. Like you can basically see the perspectives of what people have on the paper. I mean, granted,
Yeah,
they may not be experts in the field, but
yeah,
in modern AI nowadays, like who is really an expert? Like
yeah,
is
exactly.
we
Yeah,
are
and in some cases they are experts, like in these two cases, and they'll kind of get upvoted to the top if they're more senior people. So exactly.
correct. In fact, I would say that even for experts, like especially for a field like AI, you might be clouded by previous biases
Oh
that you
yeah,
have. And
yeah,
sometimes the new idea might be very different from your own bias, but that
yeah,
new idea could work. So
absolutely.
yeah, rather than having it being closed source review, just put the idea out there. If it works, people will use it. If not, then that's it. So I really like this marketplace of ideas kind of thing because it will
Yeah,
encourage people to just write things and just show it to the world and not impede
yeah,
progress because it's paywall or like blocked by a certain
yeah,
review
exactly.
process.
And to that end, I'd love to give like a lot of credit to the people at Archive too for kind of Archive I'm pretty sure was started like in the early 1990s, like many decades ago, and it's kind of grown steadily since then. And it's great that like they've taken the initiative to kind of put some initial like put this groundwork for uh, having like open research. I can't imagine a world where if there wasn't something like Archive as a CS researcher, if I had to go and like um, either every paper is on some different website or I had to pay for it. I think Archive's done a tremendous job, and so it's cool that we get to build off of what they've done. But yeah,
Nice. So actually, I'd like to take the remaining few minutes just to talk about like the motivation behind you starting this project.
um, the I guess the motivation out of this project, it's kind of a funny story. Uh, I would say that roughly 2 years ago, I had to take a web development class just to graduate, like as a required course. I wasn't really interested in web dev. Obviously, I did like AI coursework, and as a final project, I was like, well, we should put together some really poor looking comment system on papers. It's something I discussed with folks like many months prior to that, and I built it. I got a B in the class for what it's worth. So I didn't do. The project was not good at the time. It wasn't a well-written site, and 1 year after that, I showed it to my roommate actually, and it was just a very late night. We were both stuck on problem set on homework, and so I showed him the idea, and he was like, "This is like a really good idea. You should like we should kind of push this out and see what happens." And for the thinking when working on this project was always like, oh, it's just web development. We'll work on it for a few weeks, push it out, and we're done. It's been like 14 months since starting, so there's always like stuff to build on, stuff to add, and stuff we're learning. I would say the motivation now is, I would say one big part of the motivation is, I think there's a real, like there's a chance to make a difference in academia here and like build something that's actually useful. A lot of people are, a lot of times, a lot of grads from Stanford are kind of there's a kind of stereotype that a lot of them will go and sell out and work in industries that maybe are not the most benefit to society. And I won't judge, but I think it's cool that we get a chance to work on something that people think is good, that I think is helpful. And I think that's the primary motivator. I would also say another motivator is it's a lot of learning. Every day I'm learning something new about the problems in academia, getting to talk to people in academia. I think there's so many interesting people that are doing PhDs, doing research, and I get to talk to them about their thoughts on the site. So I think that's like a privilege, if anything. So yeah.
Nice. So how has your like view of like academia changed like ever since you started this? I know you started this more of a like for your module, you wanted people to comment on papers, and
Yeah.
then slowly you move on to support the whole ecosystem of like
Yeah.
researchers, PhDs. Like how has your view
Yeah.
of this like how has it evolved? Like I'm just
Yeah.
curious.
Yeah. So I think I've had a evolution of my viewpoint towards the PhD. I'd say the first 2 years of undergrad, I did a lot of research, and the plan was that I think I was pretty 50-50 and maybe I was going to do a PhD. And then I had some good experiences actually working in industry where I felt I wasn't maybe doing research level work, but I was doing um, research type work where I was experimenting with a model, seeing if it was working. Um, in academia, I guess there is the problem of I had access to a lot more compute when I was in industry doing work. Although I don't think that should be a reason to drive someone away from academia. There's so much great work you can do without having access to, 100,000 GPU, 100,000 GPUs. But I think by the time I started the project, funny enough, I think I was pretty set on returning to industry and just doing stuff there. I think the thinking was that that was more fast paced in terms of I wasn't sure if I had an idea that I wanted to commit a lot of years to. And so that was kind of the thinking behind that. In terms of how this specific project has changed my viewpoint, um, I think one thing is like being an academic is hard. Like you have to deal with reviews, you have to deal with grants, you have to apply to grants. I guess like talking to academics basically every day, yeah, you kind of realize like, yeah, this is this is hard. So I would say that's probably the biggest takeaway from just working directly on the project.
Nice. So and before we conclude, like do you have any like advice you have for students or academics wanting to use your alphaXiv platform? Like
Yeah.
what do you hope to see it grow into? Yeah, you have any concluding words?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say for I guess for students more junior to me, if I have advice for maybe someone entering college, definitely like keep an open mind and try new things, right? I didn't expect myself to do web development, and not that there's anything wrong, but like that was just way different for my interests. That like, oh, I was gonna do with web development, that felt like me wanting to study history or something way different. And so, but it's something I'm passionate about and I work on. And so I would say that's the biggest takeaway of keep an open mind and try new things. For academics, I certainly have no advice. Your life is harder than mine. And so if there's anything that academics have that they would like to see on the site, you should absolutely. We have an email on the website, or let
So
John
maybe you
know.
could
Or
let us know the email as well so people know where
yeah,
to feedback.
oh, just contact the word contact at alphaXiv.org. And so I think a lot of good ideas have come from academics emailing us about, hey, I see this pain point. What could you do to fix that? And we go ahead and do that. The idea of upvoting was a suggestion from an academic as well. So
Very nice. I really appreciate Rehaan and your team
yeah,
setting up
yeah,
this site and also
yeah,
for potentially changing the landscape of academia if this takes off.
yeah,
And I would really like to encourage everyone to start using this platform because this collaboration and sharing of ideas is the key to grow ideas, and it's also the key to combat all the walls that could potentially lead to an idea being shared, like peer reviews and so on. Thanks so
Yeah.
much for bringing this to us.
I appreciate you. I appreciate your time and making this happen. Yeah, thank you.
Yep. See you.
Cool.